Wonderful. Thank you for introducing yourselves. Really quickly before we get started, what this deep dive is, we offer business process management training to all employees at Elevations, and it's actually required for all leaders at the organization. So, manager on up, once you become a leader, you are required to take this training. So, we thought it would be a good idea to actually go through what we train all of our staff on with all of you. Feel free to chat in questions as we go. Raise your hand if you have a question, and one of the facilitators will help make sure that we get that question answered for you. All right. So quickly, I'm going to give you an overview of the team that we work with, the BPM team, just so that you understand our organizational structure, where we sit in the organization, how we work together. So we're part of the Enterprise Transformation Group, which is led by Genevieve Cavallo. Reporting into Genevieve, we have the director of the EPMO, or the Enterprise Project Management Office. So all of our Scrum Masters, all of our project managers are overseen by Julie. In the middle, we've got Emily. She just introduced herself. She is the Director of Performance Excellence. So the business analysts and myself, the process architect, report into Emily on the business process management team. And then we have Tom. Many of you have probably heard Tom speak earlier today. He is the Director of Business Intelligence. So all of our business analysts report in through, or business intelligence analysts report in through Tom. These teams all work together very closely. Projects and process and data work hand in hand for everything that we do in the organization. So it makes sense for all of our teams to report in through the same leadership. So that's sort of the structure of our team, how we work together, and why. For the rest of the course, we're going to go over our methodology. So what is business process management, the methodology, some related tool set, and then we're really going to dive into our continuous improvement cycle, that designing, developing, deploying, monitoring, and improvement. You've probably seen those slides throughout the day. We're going to talk even more about what actually happens in each of those phases. So our overview of the BPM program starts with what is business process management. So it comes down to the documentation of what we do, what our members or customers, it's not always members who are receiving the outputs of our processes, what do they expect from us? How do we deliver to our members and our customers? How do we make sure that we're meeting their expectations? From there, it's monitoring our performance and then improving how we work. Again, you may have heard this many times today, but it's really those three pieces coming together: people, technology, and process. BPM is making sure that those three pieces are working together, making sure that we're understanding who is doing what with what technology and what is the process that they're following to get from inputs to outputs. That's really what our team does. That's the message that we try to get out to the rest of the organization, and making sure that people are following our methodology, making sure that everyone is on the same page or speaking the same language. Why does BPM matter? If we don't have an eye on what we're doing, if things aren't managed, it turns to chaos. It gets, it can get a little hectic. We run into bottlenecks. We're not meeting our members' demands. We're not meeting our customers' demands. It's taking too long to get things out to our members or our customers. We are a financial institution. We are heavily regulated at the state level and the federal level. So BPM also helps us maintain our regulatory compliance. We have our friend Bill Gates here. One of the things that Bill says about process and technology, the first rule of any technology is that automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify the efficiency. I have to agree with that 100%. And I agree with the second part of what he says. The second rule is that automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency. I have a question for you. You don't have to answer. You're welcome to raise a hand or throw out a thumbs up if you'd like. How many of you have been in a situation, either in your current employer or with another employer, where you have implemented technology on bad process? How many of us have experienced that? I will raise my hand. We have all been there. We understand it happens, but our role as the business process management team is to make sure that that is limited, that that is not happening whenever possible. Good process is foundational to good technology, and many of the improvements that we can do are free. Emily spoke in a session right before this about eliminating waste. That's free. Eliminating extra steps, extra handoffs, extra clicks. Those are all things that we can do to improve a process that don't cost anything. It's important that we conduct thorough process improvement analysis before we try to implement technology. We want to make sure that we understand how everything is working before we try to tack technology on top of that. And this cycle, the continuous improvement cycle, everything that we're talking about today will show you how we do that here at Elevations. So we have our continuous improvement cycle. I believe you've probably seen this at least once today already. The things on the right side of the screen in the dark blue, the design, develop, and deploy, Elevations, I would like to say that we are experts in this field. We have over 600 processes documented. That is something that really helped us win our first Baldrige Award, was the number of processes that we documented. People knew where to go to get these processes. People knew where to go to get knowledge assets to help them do their day-to-day jobs. The stuff in the light blue on the left side, monitoring and improving, that is BPM 2.0 for Elevations. That is us leveling up and getting even better at what we do. So making sure that our processes are working the way that not only we want them to, but the way our members and our customers want them to, and then improving them. One, if our customers think they need to be improved, if our members think they need to be improved, and two, maybe we just found a better way of doing something. Maybe we found a more innovative way of doing something, or there's a system enhancement or something that we need to do that will make our processes work better. And so it's a cycle. Once we go through improving, we start all over again and we make updates to our processes. So we're going to dive into more detail on each of these things, but that's just that high level overview of how we use this at Elevations. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay, we will just keep on rolling then. Maybe if I can advance my slides. There we go. I'm actually going to let Amy present this slide because she does such a fabulous job.
Okay, so this is just something overview. We'll talk about this more as we go through the presentation, but everyone is important to process. And so from our senior leadership relies on our processes to help with strategic planning and setting goals. When we first kicked off our Baldrige journey, our strategic planning process was one of the first processes that we deployed. From there, we developed a set of reoccurring meetings to make sure the right people are getting the right information to make the right decisions. We want to be transparent, make sure we're not meeting in silos, making assumptions. Like, we are cascading everything, making sure everybody's involved. The next group that's important is the process owners. The process owners really are one of the most important parts of this. A process owner is likely to be a manager of a department that the process is representing. I'm sure you've heard it, we're trying to level up a little bit, but right now, if the manager is involved, they help us remove barriers, make decisions, have discussions. They have an idea where they want to go. Are we going in the right direction? Are there ways to improve that? The process owners are also responsible for ensuring the process is achieving what it's supposed to be, setting measurements and targets, and responding to the process when it's underperforming. We'll go into that a little bit more when we get to the monitoring and improving stage, but really we rely on the process owners to do that. Process improvement specialists, they are part of special forces. They are an individual who supports a functional area. I'm sure you've heard special forces. There's two different roles, documentation specialists and process improvement specialists. The BPM team really supports the process improvement specialists. With this, they assist the process owners in documenting and maintaining process maps, as well as identifying efficiencies. As processes move into the improvement stage, the process improvement specialist will also assist and even facilitate process improvement workshops. This is kind of a side role that they have on top of their daily tasks or daily job that they complete. Then we have the business process management team. This is the team that Kari and I are part of. We are a team of 5, and that's including our manager, Emily Shea, who you've met earlier. We help facilitate process improvement workshops. We provide ongoing training and coaching and support the organization related to business process management. We sit on project scrum teams to ensure we are solving the right thing and how it's impacting other processes and knowledge assets. So we support the organization as a whole and help drive this methodology throughout the organization. Then we have stakeholders and SMEs. And these are basically the people who are directly impacted and involved in the process. They are very important to this. They are the individuals that live the process every day. They can provide insight into what's really happening and maybe even have some ideas on how to improve the process. They are in the weeds. They experience it. With them, we don't have to make assumptions on things. We know for a fact, yes, X is happening, so Y is happening. So it's very important to include your stakeholders and SMEs. So basically, the moral of the slide is everyone is involved. If you're entry level or the CEO of Elevations, you are involved in process one way or another. We want to make sure we are avoiding working in silos and making any assumptions.
Thank you, Amy. She always does so great on that slide. I love having her share that one. All right. So a little more in depth on Special Forces. This team is a group of individual contributors from across the organization. It's primarily individual contributors. They support their process owners, typically managers or leaders in the organization, in making sure that we have our processes documented, as well as knowledge assets that support those processes documented. The Special Forces teams work directly with the knowledge management team, Amber's team, and the BPM team, the team that Emily, Amy, and I are on. And it really just helps build that culture of continuous improvement. That is how we integrate BPM throughout the entire organization, is having people throughout the organization part of this Special Forces team. It really helps individual contributors as well develop skills that they may not get otherwise. It's a growth and development opportunity for them. I've been with the organization for 9 years. When I started, I was a compliance officer, completely different role from business process management, but I was asked to be a part of this Special Forces team. I think 6-7 years later, I was able to transition that into a career in business process management because it clicked with me. It made sense. So this is a really great way to engage your organization, but also develop those people who may have a hidden passion for process or documentation. There we go. So on the knowledge support side, we have these documentation specialists that are led by our knowledge management team. Again, they support their process owners, so their managers or leaders in the organization, with governance of our procedures or knowledge assets. They're making sure that they are documented so that end users know how to do their jobs. And then they make sure that they're reviewed regularly to make sure that they're up to date, making sure that people have what they need when they need it. On the process side, we have our process improvement specialists that are led by the BPM team, and they support the process owners, again, managers and leaders, in process deployment and improvement. So this isn't a siloed effort. This isn't just a one team doing it all. This is a group of individuals across the organization, and that's how we've made it successful. That is really what has grown that culture of continuous improvement for Elevations. The enterprise process map. We talk about this a lot at Elevations. This was based off of APQC framework. We've had this for quite a while. We've made some changes, some tweaks, some updates over the years. Emily mentioned in the session that she just led before this one that we're looking at doing a bigger update to this. This is not a static document. This is not something that you create once and then it just lives on forever. This is something that grows with the organization. And that's something that Elevations has done. It has grown with us as we have grown. BPM has actually taken the enterprise category map and divided up responsibilities for how we support the organization. So Emily, the director of our team, she supports more of the strategic categories. So our leadership, our people team, our executives, those areas are the teams that she supports. I support all of our enabling categories. So, our IT team, our corporate real estate, our risk teams. Amy actually sits on our mortgage value stream team, that Scrum team. She's the business analyst for that team, so she supports everything that's related to the mortgage value stream. There are a few others that actually tie closely into that area, like loss mitigation, accounting, and finance. So she supports those areas as well. Charles is the business analyst for our business lending and consumer lending value streams. And he supports all of the areas that tie into business lending, commercial lending, and consumer lending. And then we have Kyle, who supports our move and manage money value stream, and any category in our enterprise process map that sort of feeds into that move and manage money value stream, like retail, remote delivery, our account services, payment services, our cards program, all feed into Kyle, and he supports all of those. So that's sort of how we divide and conquer to make sure that everybody gets the support that they need. When we talk about special forces, you see all these categories under our names. We typically have we have one representative from special forces for all of these categories. So we as a BPM team are leading these special forces representatives in best practices. We are mentoring them, we're guiding them, we're giving them the support that they need while they're supporting their functional teams. Does anybody have questions so far? All right, we will just keep on going.
Oh, it actually looks like Kirk's got a question.
Oh, wonderful.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm going to ask a lot of questions later, so I hope you're ready. But
yes, please. We are here to share.
So our company is a credit union in Canada, and we have a business process management team. We're nowhere near as mature in terms of how we've structured the organization as you, but we have gone down the road of starting to document what we're referring to as our process architecture. I'm the process architect for the credit union. I don't know if our roles are kind of equivalent or if our titles are just the same, but one question I had is that we have this concept of value stream for delivery for project work, and then we have processes that deliver value to our members. Is that roughly equivalent to what you're talking about here? Because when I see under Amy, for example, mortgage delivery, is that representative of delivering to members or delivering the project work to fix mortgages or work on them?
All of the above, actually. So that mortgage delivery, that's delivering the mortgages to the people who are applying for them, to the members or the clients that are asking Elevations for a mortgage. Amy is a relative expert on everything in that area. So she also sits on the mortgage project delivery team. So she supports that, making sure their processes are good for delivering on that, but also when projects come in, she's going to support that project work as well.
So kind of to elaborate a little bit more, to give you an example, like one that we just upgraded or improved or reviewed was the application process. Like what is the member going through when they apply for a first mortgage? But also where's the handoff to that? Once it leaves our loan officer's hands, it goes to another group who does some things. What did they do? How does that impact? And then they transfers on to another group, which is our processing team. So it's kind of both how it impacts the member, but also we have internal members too, our internal customers. So we want to make sure we're meeting the needs of our employees as well, so that we're not dropping the ball somewhere that will ruin the member experience.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Nick has a great question for you guys. He says, do you incentivize your special forces?
Oof, we try real hard, but as I'm sure as everyone knows, it's been a rough few years. You know, we have to make cuts where we can and decrease things. Just COVID, we live in COVID world now. We try to do get-togethers. We try to do special events for our special forces. For quite a while, we offered Lean Six Sigma training and certification for those special forces representatives that were interested. We really do a lot of one-on-one coaching and development and trying to help them build skills that they're interested in building. So it's not always monetary incentives, which I think most people would prefer sometimes, but we do what we can with what we have. So really trying to build those relationships, trying to build up skills that people can take with them for the rest of their careers, whether it's here or say they move on to something else. It's really that coaching and development piece that we try to focus on.
And to add on to that, I think it helps build relationships so that if you want to transfer or move within other departments, it helps you build those relationships with those managers or those teams, and you kind of get insight on what other departments do as well, because they are a stakeholder in your process and you see more visibility. It's like, oh, like Kari said, she started in compliance, moved to BPM, you get that visibility. So it kind of helps you build relationships as well.
Yeah, it's a great stepping stone for other positions as they become open. It gives, again, that individual contributor level. So people who may not get to work one-on-one with executives very often, they get more of that insight into the inner workings of the organization and learn more about what we do. So we really try to focus on that. It was a great question, because that's something that we are constantly keeping in front of mind. How do we make sure that we keep people excited about this and wanting to do it? And that's something, it's a continual work in progress. Right. So we're going to move into the first 3 phases of the continuous improvement cycle: designing, developing, and deploying. The first phase, designing, this is really where you identify the need for a process. It's, do you need something documented? Do we have this task or this item documented already? Does it exist? What do we know about it? It's really asking those questions. Do we know how we do this? Yes or no? If no, here's where we start. So in this phase, you go through identifying the need for the process. Who's going to own it? We stress that process ownership is vital. That's one of the first things we do is we know we need a process. Who's going to be responsible for it? Who's going to own it? We'll talk about the objective. We'll give it a name. We'll determine where it lives in the organization relevant to the enterprise process map. We'll build a process team, so figure out all those stakeholders, the subject matter experts, who knows about this process, and then we create our SIPOC. So that's everything that happens in the design phase. I'm not going to go into each of these. I've picked out some selected items that I thought were most valuable. So the first piece, when is a process needed? It really comes down to needing a source of truth. We need a clear picture of information about something, whatever that something is, something within the organization. More people need to know about it. Everybody needs to be on the same page with how something is done. And then we figure out who is responsible for that process. Again, who is that process owner? Who's going to be responsible for making sure that this process is meeting its objective, it's achieving what we want it to achieve. That process owner is also going to set measurements and targets for this process so that we can monitor its performance. If a process is underperforming, it's the process owner's responsibility to take action to improve it, or to initiate the action to improve it. Process owners can delegate some of their activities to their special forces member. It depends on the skill that's available on their team or the bandwidth of their team, but they are able to delegate some things. Our next piece is identifying the objective and the scope of our process. So what is the purpose of completing this process? What do we hope to get out of it if we do it right? From there, it's figuring out the right level of detail for our process. This is something that we're really working on at Elevations. We've said that we have over 600 processes documented, and we're getting to a point now where we're questioning, is it the right level of detail? Have we gone too far into the weeds? Do we need to zoom out more? So we've broken our process types into sub-processes and end-to-end processes. And I've got some examples here where a lot of our processes, a lot of our 600 processes are currently at this brush our teeth level. So when we do our training, we try to make process relevant to everyone. So we talk about things that you do in your daily life, because that really gets people thinking about process ownership and what a process is. So today we have a lot of processes documented at the sub-process level where we're going to brush our teeth. Here are all the steps that we take to brush our teeth. That's fine. That works just fine as a process. But if we level it up and we take it to that end-to-end level, we're looking at something more in line of preparing for work as opposed to just brushing your teeth. So you can see, there's a similar number of steps, but it's a higher level of information as opposed to really diving into the weeds. We can see that brushing our teeth is still a part of this end-to-end process, but we don't go into that very minor detail about how you're brushing your teeth. We leave that for knowledge assets or procedures that need to know information to actually perform the role.
This example also shows how easy process is. Like, everything has a process and you don't realize it. There's some people that are really good at process and there's some people who really aren't. And some of you were in Brooke's session earlier and how she said she kind of struggled with it. You have someone there to help document it, and something as your morning routine is a process. Knowing it or not, it is a process. And so this is the example that we use to help relate it to how easy a process can be.
Thank you, Amy. So one of the things that we do also in this training, and it's part of building a process, is identifying your SIPOC. This is Lean Six Sigma speak. Not everybody understands what a SIPOC is. So we teach people, this is what a SIPOC is. This is why it matters. And we have people identify their morning routine, and then we have them build a SIPOC based on their morning routine. One thing that has been really successful for us in integrating BPM and continuous improvement through the organization is using common language. So instead of overcomplicating things or using all of that Lean Six Sigma jargon, we try to make it something easy to understand for everyone. SIPOC, you can't really get around that one or make it any prettier, but it is something that we teach everyone who comes through this class. So if you don't know, SIPOC stands for supplier. The S is supplier, the person or the organization that's providing you the inputs to your process. Our I is for inputs. That's what you get from your suppliers to initiate or start your process. at this point in time in the cycle, we don't know what our process is yet. So it's in a black box. We know that all of this information is going to help us build out our process, but we don't actually know what the process looks like yet. O is for outputs, so the resources that are produced by the process. And customers is who we're doing it for. Who are we creating those outputs for and giving those outputs to? A great way to do a SIPOC for an organization that is very focused on their customers, or in our case, members, is to identify your customers first. So start with the customers. Who is benefiting? Who is getting the outputs of this process? And then work your way backwards. That's been a great way for us to really keep that focus on our members as we go through and build all of our processes. As a credit union, we don't exist if we don't have our members. So making sure they're at front of mind has been very helpful for us.
We've got a question in the chat.
I saw that. That's a great question. Now I have. The question was, have you thought about renaming it to Copus to support the member first? I like that. I think that's a great idea. And that's something that's going to go on my little sticky notes as a follow-up. Maybe that is an approach that we take to put that focus on the member first.
There's another question from Kirk, kind of in the same genre. Have we ever used an IGOE, inputs, guides, outputs, enablers?
I personally have not. I see Emily shaking her head. Amy, have you?
No.
Okay. Is that, Kirk, is that something that you use currently? I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, we're starting to use it. We hired a consultant called the Process Renewal Group up in Canada here, and that's one of the methodologies that they use. It's quite similar to SIPOC. It's not so foreign from it. I think the primary difference is it bridges a SIPOC and maybe some of the concepts around what are the enabling technologies, what are the enabling roles, and then the guides are the business rules, the training that might be required, and it just allows you to kind of analyze the quality of those things as well. So you can kind of go through and rate things once you've documented them. It's a different technique, but I was just curious if you had used that before. Thank you.
You said you were going to have questions. I'm going to have questions for you because that sounds great. And, you know, we always want to look for different ways of doing things, right? If we stick with one thing forever, we might miss something.
Oh, yeah, we're very collaborative in credit union land, so we can contact each other and chat.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much. That was a great question. All right, so that was the high level overview of designing, what we're looking for, what we're doing in that phase. The next phase is developing. This is where we actually create our process map. We start by creating the process map. We identify other processes that come before this process or after this process, and that really helps us identify what is the scope of our process? Have we gone too narrow and we actually need to do an end-to-end, or are we at the right level? Identifying these links in all of our processes helps us go back to those 600 processes that we have today and start building them into those larger end-to-end processes. I know Ray probably brought this up earlier. If any of you were in the session with Ray earlier, member swim lanes. So we do use member swim lanes, but it matters what level of process we're looking at. We can't throw a member swim lane into every process that we use because currently not every process that we have documented shows the impact to the member or has a handoff to the member. So that's something we're really considering as we build these end-to-end flow charts, is where is the impact to the member, making sure that that member swim lane is included in those end-to-end maps. Was there, let me see.
We have a couple of questions.
See that, okay.
Devin asks, how do you guys capture your SIPOC analysis? How do your SIPOC analysis inform the structure of your enterprise process map?
That is a great question. So when we create all of our processes, the first box, and I have a slide that shows what a process map looks like, but that first box that we create in our swim lane flow chart is the SIPOC box. Everybody has access to that. Everybody can see, all the information that we've built into that SIPOC. And then we build our swim lanes for our flow chart off of that. We can show handoffs throughout the organization. We can show, where ownership of that process lives, and that's how we can tie it back into that, into the enterprise process map.
Great. And then the next question is, when you publish the process, do you include procedures or link to? Also, how do you capture the policies?
So good. These are all great questions. So when we publish, we have two systems at the moment, two sources of truth. So we have our published library of all of our processes in BlueWorks Live. That's the software that we use for process mapping. And then we have our source of truth for procedures or knowledge assets called the Summit. When we do a stakeholder validation, we'll talk about that in a couple of slides, we try to tie these processes and procedures together so you're reviewing everything at once. And then our numbering system is based off of our enterprise process category map. So we name a process based off that enterprise process map. Any procedures that support that process are going to follow the same numbering system so that it's all sort of tied together based off of those same numbers. Does that help? Okay, perfect. And with policies, so we have our policies are sort of at the top of what we do. They drive everything that we can and can't do with the organization. And then our processes and our procedures are all built off of those policies. So the policies sort of guide everything, and then our processes, procedures, knowledge assets all support those policies. Because again, financial institution, heavily regulated, we have to make sure that we're meeting regulator standards.
Okay, and then another question is, are your business rules a separate concept from your policies?
Emily, I'm going to defer to that one defer to you on that one because you've done more with the business rules.
I mentioned in an earlier session that we're starting to sort of govern reviews for business rules, but they definitely are different than policies. It's business rules that are really more associated with specific process maps.
It looks like there was also a question about what's the advantages of including the SIPOC info in separate activity box in BlueWorks versus using the SIPOC function native to the BlueWorks software.
I guess as opposed to including it all in one location, as opposed to having it in multiple boxes. So for those of you familiar with BlueWorks Live, and I'll try to explain, let me see if I can advance the slide so you can, I'm not sure how big this is going to show up. I apologize, it's so tiny. I wasn't planning on going a lot into BlueWorks Live. So we start all of our processes with a yellow box that lists out SIPOC. That is all encompassing of the entire process. You can add a specific SIPOC or add specific SIPOC information for each individual activity box. I think as we start to leverage more of these end-to-end process maps, that is probably something that we'll start doing, is identifying those SIPOCs as we zoom out a little bit more. Right now, our processes are more in the weeds, I think, so that's why we have that one SIPOC box for the entire process. Does that help? I see the value of having it for each activity box, but we're a little too narrow in our scope right now, I think.
And one thing that we do use the individual boxes for is like to capture the systems. Like if there's an activity being done, what system is it being done in? And we don't capture that in the SIPOC area because throughout your process, you could be using different tools to complete a certain task. So we do kind of leverage the information within those boxes, but not necessary for the SIPOC.
Yes, BlueWorks can be tricky. That is 100% accurate. We've been very happy with BlueWorks, and that was sort of, I wanted to build up to this slide. Flowcharting is awesome. It doesn't matter if you use BlueWorks Live or sticky notes. We went 3-4 years just using sticky notes on a wall in a commonly used meeting room before we launched BlueWorks Live. So you don't have to have fancy software or process mapping tools to do process mapping. You can do it in PowerPoint, you can do it in Excel spreadsheets, you can use Visio. There are a lot of ways that you can do it. It's just creating boxes and adding, lines that show this comes first and then we do this. So again, doesn't matter what you do it's the benefit of the flow chart itself. It's making sure that you're able to identify who does what and when they do it. And it really helps you visualize like getting the steps from starting to finish. You're able to push the process all the way through from start to finish. For a lot of us on the business process team, Amber, I'm so sorry, because your knowledge management, it's hard for us to look at a block of text. And a lot of people probably feel that way, but us process nerds especially, it is so much easier for us to look at pretty pictures and get an understanding of what's happening than it is to look at a paragraph. So that's why we love process mapping. That's why we love flowcharts. Again, BlueWorks has been great for us, but that doesn't mean that everybody has to use it. It doesn't mean that you can only be successful if you use BlueWorks. There are a lot of great tools. And sticky notes. I still do a lot of sessions with sticky notes because it's old reliable. It works well and it gives you the same impact. I think there was...
We were asked, do you use the policy function in BlueWorks to connect your processes?
Not great, to be honest. We've toyed with it. We've turned it on, we've looked at it, I guess, we've taken it out of the garage, taken it for a spin around the block. We haven't fully implemented it yet. We're not ready to take the family on vacation. It's something it's a work in progress. It's all continuous improvement. It's baby steps and just building into something bigger. I think the entire BPM team would love to see that turned on and working. We're ready for it, but it doesn't mean that the whole organization is ready for it yet. So that's a slow build for us. All right. Were there any more questions? Did I miss anything? All right. So that was develop. There are more steps that happen in there. If you guys want to know more about that, we're happy to talk offline or answer questions or even share our resources with you. Because again, credit unions are a very collaborative group of folks. We love to help each other succeed. So if you want to know more about any of this, please reach out and we're happy to share that with you. But develop is really just about putting your ideas on paper, visualizing it so that everybody can see and say, oh yeah, that is what we do, or no, that looks wrong. Mary does not do this then. We need to fix that. Once we get through developing, we have all of our thoughts on paper. We all agree, we say, yeah, that looks right. We're ready to deploy it to the organization. We're ready to get it out there and say, okay, guys, we all agreed. This is how we do whatever it is. And that looks like gaining stakeholder approval. Amy mentioned we do not do this in a silo. That is the whole purpose of BPM, is to not act in a silo, to not make assumptions. It's to collaborate with the organization to figure out, is this really what we do? From there, we'll do change management, and that's where Amber and her team come in. They make sure we're getting the right changes out at the right time. We're not overwhelming people. If we have to roll it out, over time, we will. She's really going to help facilitate that. And then submitting those publishing requests or making sure that the documents are live in our sources of truth, which is BlueWorks Live for process and our Summit or SharePoint for knowledge assets. I'll dive more into stakeholder approval or stakeholder validation, as we call it, because that really is the cornerstone of BPM. This really ensures that everybody has a say, that everybody is on the same page. A stakeholder is any individual or team that cares about the outcome of the process. So they may not have activities in the process, but for us, where we're a financial institution, it could be our compliance team, it could be our legal team, it could be our fraud team. They may not have any activities in here, but they have an understanding of risks or how the process, could expose us to risks. So they need to be involved as a stakeholder to say, yes, you are mitigating these risks, or no, this could be a potential issue. So we're going to bring all of those stakeholders together, all of the people that care about the outcome of the process, and we're going to facilitate. Used to be in person, but hello COVID, we're all on Zoom now, but we're going to facilitate a meeting with all of our stakeholders. And in that meeting, we're going to review the objective of our process. We're going to review that SIPOC. We'll go over the flow chart step by step, make sure everybody agrees with it, and any supporting knowledge assets. So if we created procedures, if we created job aids, whatever it is, that better be reviewed at the same time. We want stakeholders reviewing a complete package to make sure that everything looks good before we publish it for the organization. People may have questions about the process. People may say, I'm not really sure this is how it works. I talked to my team, I talked to the people who live in this every day, and they gave me some different information. Can we follow up on this? This is where our process owners come in again. These decision makers, these are the ones who are able to say, that is an issue. Let's solve that. Let's make a change. Or I'm not really convinced that that's an issue, or I'm not sure that we need to change the whole process because of this. That responsibility comes onto the process owner to take care of. They're going to answer questions and make any changes that may be necessary to the process before we publish it. The last piece is obtaining sign-off, and we do leverage BlueWorks Live to do this. We've created a workflow that assigns tasks to specific individuals, most often our process owners, our special forces representatives, and stakeholders, so that we can get that CYA that yes, I did validate this. I was in that meeting where things were reviewed. I did receive the option to give feedback or say, I want this changed. We put that back on those stakeholders because you may or may not have experience. Sometimes someone comes up and says, wait a minute, I didn't approve this. What are you talking about? We've come up with a way to manage that. Now we can go back and say, okay, so-and-so from your team approved this, or actually you did approve this, or, oh, you were right. Somehow this bypassed you. We're able to take this out of the publishing process. We can, put the brakes on it and go back and reassess. So that's why we've done this sign off in BlueWorks Live, is to make sure that people really are given that chance to validate the work before it's deployed to the organization. The last piece is making it live for the organization. So again, we have two sources of truth for processes and procedures. The first one is BlueWorks Live. This is where all of the process mapping is done for us. We have a drafts library where our special forces, our process owners, the BPM team, we're in there actively creating these processes. Once it goes through that stakeholder validation, it gets moved into a published library where anybody in the organization can have access to it. They can see exactly how the process works. They can click into that SciPoc box and see all of the information that's contained there. But we don't move something to that published library that everyone can see until we've completed stakeholder validation. Same is for the summit. This is on our intranet, it's part of SharePoint. This is where we publish all of our knowledge assets, so our procedures, our job aids, training resources, whatever it is that helps end users know how to do their jobs. It's published on the summit. Publishing request goes through for that as well. There's a drafts library where people can actively work on procedures, job aids, whatever it is. They can get feedback, have track changes turned on, allow comments on these draft versions from their stakeholders. Once it goes to publishing with knowledge management, track changes is turned off, all the comments come off. We make sure that everything was updated, taken care of, and then it's published and live and available to anyone in the organization who wants to use it. So that is publishing. A lot of information there, but that is the design, develop, and deploy for continuous improvement. The next pieces are my personal favorites. I really love the monitoring and improving because that's where the fun stuff happens. That's where the magic happens. So when we talk about monitoring, it's measuring our performance. Are we doing what we said we were going to do? Are we hitting our customers' requirements or expectations of us? I will go into each of these in more detail than I did on the previous ones. So when we start, we want to come up with a metric. What is the purpose of monitoring? We want to get a good metric. It's a clear quantitative standard of measurement. There are lead measures or our in-process measures, or there are lag measures, our outcome measures. We want to make sure that we have both. They go hand in hand. It's great to have lag measures to tell you how you're doing, but you can drive your performance when you have lead measures as well. They're predictive, or they're able to influence those outcome measures. The example that we go through, because unfortunately most of us have gone through this in our lives, losing 5 pounds. This is the easiest way to break it down. Our lag measure is going to be to lose 5 pounds by week 6. Our lead measures are those things that we can do to influence whether or not we're going to hit that lag measure. So my lead measures will be going to the gym for 4 or more times a week by week 6, eating less than 2,000 calories a day on average per week, and then drinking less than 5 drinks per week. I'm going to keep track of all of those things, and if I hit all of those lead measures, chances are really good that I'm going to lose that 5 pounds by week 6. If I don't have those lead measures, it could just be dumb luck if I lose 5 pounds by week 6. I won't know what it was that made me successful. Or if I'm not keeping track of anything, I probably won't lose any weight at all. So that's how we break down lead and lag measures. Again, it's bringing that common language to the organization. Our BITE team, they are super smart people. They talk circles around all of us because that's what they do. They live in data, but we don't expect the entire organization to live in that data. So we're going to bring the language to them, make sure that it makes sense to them, and then we'll let BITE do all the crazy stuff they do in the background. Another thing, we leverage Baldrige framework for our results in monitoring very heavily. Everything is built off of Let's See. So we start with levels. It's the current performance on a meaningful scale, where you are right here, right now. So our example that we use is cost of funds. If we look at cost of funds just as it is on the screen, it doesn't really mean a whole lot. I don't know what this means, and I've heard BITE present this I don't know how many times. There are probably 2 people in our organization who know what this measure means just looking at it. That is Michael, our CFO, and Gitas, our head of finance. No one else could tell you what that means. We need to add some context to it. So we're going to look at trends, our rate of performance improvement or continuation of good performance. So how are we doing over time? Cost of funds, we see that it was a little higher and we dipped down around 2017, 2018, and then we went back up in 2019. Does this tell us if we're doing good or bad? Do we know? I'm still not entirely sure what's happening with this slide. So the next level, we're going to go to comparison. So we're going to evaluate our performance relative to that of other organizations that are similar to our size, or we're going to look at their benchmarks. So we look at the same blue line in comparison to other organizations, starts to have more context, starts to have more value or more meaning to us. We're looking pretty good. We're the blue line at the bottom. Our cost of funds or our cost to operate is significantly lower than our competitors. We're doing pretty good. But if we just look at that cost of funds bullet or number, it doesn't really tell us anything. So we need to look at trends. We need to look at comparison. And then we need to have integration. So do our results address important performance requirements? Are we doing what we want to do with these results, or are we just looking at numbers for the sake of looking at numbers? So you really have to tie it all together for things to make sense. And that's how Baldrige works for us in one way. It works in many ways, but especially when it comes to monitoring. Let's See has been integral for us. It's been great. On benchmarks, I think Tom spoke quite a bit about benchmarks earlier today, so I'm not going to go as in detail on this. But when we look at benchmarking, we're going to look at our national peer group. So we're going to look at credit unions that are similar to Elevations in size with our assets. We want to look at credit unions that don't have large indirect lending portfolios, because we don't have a large indirect lending portfolio. We want to look at credit unions that have larger mortgage portfolios, because that's what we do. So we want to look at peers that are very similar to us. We want to compare apples to apples instead of apples to oranges. We leverage Cornerstone quite a bit for in-process operational metrics. They give us a lot of information on a lot of different areas of the organization and other organizations. Because we are a very mortgage-heavy credit union, we look at the Mortgage Bankers Association. We want to make sure that our performance is similar to others who have heavy mortgage presence. We're going to look at our member loyalty group. How are we performing when it comes to our members versus our peers? Radon Financial Group. This is something that our finance team really looks at for how many products do our customers have with us versus others. And then there are other groups that we look at. So benchmarking is really important. We can't just look at how we're doing. We have to compare how we're doing to others to give us that full picture. There are a lot of different types of metrics that you can use. Elevations uses a member centricity model, and we've balanced our metrics that we tend to use around that member centricity model. So we have metrics that are going to tell us about our member loyalty, our financial sustainability, and our high performance culture. And we need to balance all of those. We refer to it as a three-legged stool, and you have to be able to balance on all three legs equally, or the stool is going to fall over. So we can't just get rid of all of our employees to save money, because then our member loyalty is going to go down. Maybe we're going to save money on that financial sustainability side, but our members are going to experience increased wait times. They're not going to have the same level of service that they're used to. Our employees probably aren't going to be very happy if there's only one or two of them trying to manage everything. So this is what we have to consider when we're doing when we're setting our metrics. And these are some of the most common things that we're looking at when we're monitoring our performance. All right, so when we move a process into monitoring, we ask, or we want people to understand why it matters. Why, Mr. or Mrs. Process Owner, does it matter if your process is in a monitoring state? It really just helps you understand if the work that you and your team are doing is meaningful, if it's valuable, if you're focusing on the right things. Excuse me. Are we meeting what our members are asking for? We are member centric. Everything that we do is for our members. Are our members happy with the way that we're doing things? It allows us to be proactive rather than reactive. If we know without a doubt how our processes are performing, we know when we need to fix something. We know when something isn't working. It just allows us to be better. It allows us to have better training, better opportunities, better service. We know without a doubt what is happening. We don't have to guess. One of the things we try to show how everything is interrelated. A lot of people would just go to Tom and the Bite team and say, I need a dashboard, make me a dashboard. And we had to rein them back in and say, tell me about your process first. Do you have a process? Do you have something that you're actually looking at that you need this dashboard for? So process monitoring is equal to measuring performance is equal to data analytics. They all go together. That's why all of our teams are grouped together. If we did work separately and we found that it's harmony. It's a kumbaya moment if we all work together and function together. And it helps the organization work better too when we work together. And you're not just creating a dashboard for the sake of creating a dashboard. You're creating a dashboard so that you know how you and your team are performing, or how the organization as a whole is performing.
We also know that you've heard us say multiple times that we have over 600 processes. We also realize that not all those processes will get to this monitoring stage, and that's fine. That's okay. We just need to take a step back and realize, does this process fit into a bigger process? Does this more go to an end-to-end where we can measure it and it can be tied to a dashboard? So we do relate to our staff in our special forces that we don't have an expectation that we're going to have 600 processes in monitoring. We understand that some of them will not reach that level. There's some that are just documented processes for efficiencies. And sometimes it's hard to measure efficiency. How do you measure you're saving 5 clicks by doing 1 click? It's hard to measure. So we do understand that not every process is going to get to the monitoring stage.
So when a team is ready to move a process into monitoring, we ask them to submit a request for that. Currently, it is separate from all the other intakes. That's something that we're working on. Again, that continuous improvement, always getting better. But we have a form that people can submit to us saying, hey, I have a process that I would like to have a dashboard for. It's going to come into the BPM team. We're going to schedule a meeting with the process owner, the special forces representative, and a member of the BITE team. And we're all going to work together to identify what we should monitor to tell if that process is working successfully or not. We don't want to put all of this on the process owners because they're not always experts on this. They're experts in their areas. They're experts in how things work. They may not be experts in what they need to monitor, how to build the process, or what to change in a process. So we're going to work together to make sure that they're monitoring the right things. Part of this is identifying our customer requirements. Do we have the right understanding of what the requirements are for this process? There are a variety of ways that we can do this. Someone asked earlier if we do journey mapping, and yes, we do use journey mapping. And it's usually when we're trying to identify our customer requirements. It's a tool. It's not something that's going to solve all of your problems. I think that is a common misconception for a lot of people, is that do a journey map, it's going to solve all of your problems. No, it's not. It's going to help you identify your problems or identify where you need to implement some solutions or make some changes, but it's not going to solve all of your problems. But all of these things are just tools that we use to make sure that we are delivering on what our customers are looking for. The next piece, and we do this again as a group because it's process owners may not know the right answer. Special forces reps may not know the right answer. So BPM and BITE are going to help our process owners do this. We're going to walk them through creating a monitoring and a response plan for their process. So we're going to come up with a metric name and a metric definition so that we're all talking about the same thing. When Tom from BITE helps us do this training, he has a story years ago where he was in a consumer lending meeting and they were talking about pull-through rate, and one person said it was 40%, another person said it was 60%. And it was really a situation of BYOD, bring your own data. There was no rhyme or reason to why people had the information that they had. We didn't have set definitions. We didn't have metric names. Everybody was talking about different things. Everyone left that meeting with no resolution. We didn't know what to do because people were getting their information from different places. That was when Tom first started, and we are no longer there, thank goodness. But it's because we require metric names and metric definitions so that everybody is talking about the same thing. Once we have those narrowed down, we're going to figure out what is our target value. What should this metric be performing at to know that we're successful? We want to be realistic about it too. So we're going to look at benchmarks. We're not just going to say 100% of the time we're going to get this right. That may not be realistic. It may be more realistic to say 80% of the time or 85% of the time. Who's going to monitor it? Who's actually responsible for making sure that it's performing the way that we want it to? How often are they going to monitor it? And how are they going to monitor it? Does BITE have the data in their data warehouse? Can they create a dashboard, or do we need to rely on Excel spreadsheets? We've been doing this a while, and there are some instances where we still have to use Excel spreadsheets. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a starting point. You can build into something bigger. Sticky notes and Excel spreadsheets are great tools to use when you're just getting started. Once we know what our monitoring plan is, we'll move into a response plan. So what is our response trigger? When do we need to take action? If we said that our goal is to perform at 85%, how long are we going to be below 85% before we need to take action on that? And what is our required action? What dials are we going to turn? What levers are we going to adjust to make this better? We want our process owners to come away from this feeling like they are set up for success to make those changes right away. Oh, that's actually from our training. I didn't remove that. We have our process owners and our special forces go through and create a sample monitoring and response plan for their morning routine. What are you going to monitor in your morning routine to tell you whether or not you're successful? All right. Once the monitoring and response plan is complete, we're going to put everything into BlueWorks Live, back into that SIPOC box, again, so that everybody knows what it is. We're going to attach it to dashboards, and then we monitor it. If it's performing as expected, we're going to do a little celebration. That's awesome. We're meeting what we wanted to meet, and we're going to share our best practices with the rest of the organization. If you're having success in one area, chances are good that you can translate that success to somebody else. We're all part of the same team, so we're going to share our successes with each other. If it's not monitoring, or if it's not performing the way you want it to, we've given our process owners the tools to get it where it needs to be. So that's what they're going to do. They're going to enact their monitoring and response plan, measure, did it improve the performance? Yes, yay, we're going to celebrate again. Again, we're going to share that with the rest of the organization. If this monitoring and response plan worked for you, it may work for somebody else. Let's not recreate the wheel if we don't have to. If it didn't improve, that is our segue to the improving process. So that was my crash course in monitoring. I know that's a lot of information. Let's see. Looks like a question did come in. How is your enterprise process map Power BI dashboard integrated with your BlueWorks library? So it's all based off of the enterprise process map numbering. So our process maps, all in BlueWorks Live, align with the enterprise process map numbering convention, and so do the dashboards in the Compass. Did I get that answered for you? Awesome, thank you. All right, so we will move on to improving. And we're doing a lot of this right now, which is a lot of fun. But I start this training out by asking or telling people, here are the most common signs that you're ready for process improvement. I usually have a poll in here, and I ask people, how many of you experience these types of things on a daily basis? And what do we get, Amy? Like 95% of people in the meeting answer, yes, I experience at least one of these in one of my processes. And then I say, awesome. Here's our next slide. Here's how you submit a request for process improvement. I want you to go out to this page right now and submit a request to improve your process. Because if you experience any of these things on this slide, you need to work with a process improvement specialist. You need to work with your BPM team. Something is broken and we need to help you get it fixed. So again, it's similar to the monitoring request. We ask our process owner or process improvement specialist, whoever it is that thinks a process is broken or is experiencing a broken process, to submit that request to the BPM team. We're going to schedule a meeting with our process owner, that special forces representative, and a member from the BITE team to start working on how we can fix this. What we're going to do is assess the as-is state of our process. That is something that is critical. You have to know what's currently working before you can start improving it. If you were in the session before this with Emily and Brooke referenced that multiple times. It is so important to just understand the as-is state before you start trying to make improvements. We're going to validate those measures. If we have anything that we're measuring, we're going to validate it to make sure that the data is working right, to make sure that there wasn't an error in the data or a fat-fingered incident or something like that that's telling you you're not performing when maybe you really are. We want to make sure everything is functioning before we put time and resources into an improvement. From there, we're going to baseline your performance. How are you doing today? What does it look like today so that we have a starting point so we can tell when we go back and measure again if we're getting better or not. And then we're going to assess for a quick win. What a quick win looks like is when the process owner knows what's wrong. They know the cause of the issue. It's something within their team's control. So their specific team in the credit union is able to fix it. They don't need to pull in additional resources from outside of their team. It's easy to implement. It's, the turn of a dial, the flip of a switch, something like that. Not a lot of effort or planning is going to have to go into it. It's reversible. There's an undo button. So if we make the change and it breaks it even worse or things go sideways, we need to be able to go back real quick. It should be fast to implement. It's not going to require a significant amount of time to do, and it needs to be cheap. We can't put a bunch of money into it. We can't pull in a bunch of resources to do it. It has to be very small in scope. So that's a quick win criteria. If it doesn't meet quick win, which they aren't always going to meet a quick win, we're going to move into a formal process improvement workshop or Kaizen for a lot of you, but we do those modified Kaizen. We're going to identify our core team. We're going to complete discovery, figure out what is it that we're trying to solve, what are our objectives, how are we going to do this, who do we need to bring in. We'll prepare for the event. There's a lot of planning that goes on to these facilitated workshops. We'll actually hold the event, do all of our root cause analysis, identify and select solutions. report out to everybody so that they know what came out of that. And then we're actually going to start implementing those solutions that we identified. We involve our special forces in this improvement workshop or these sessions. I'm currently doing an improvement on error reporting. It is so large and has such a big impact to the organization that I have 4 special forces representatives helping me on this initiative. They're learning how to facilitate large groups. They're learning how to do root cause analysis. They're learning how to do all sorts of things that they never thought they'd get to do. So that's sort of that teaching and that coaching and mentoring aspect of special forces. When it is a special forces rep's first improvement event, BPM is going to take the lead. We're going to teach them everything that we can about it so that they feel successful. If they do a good job, we think that they're ready to, go out of the nest on their own. We're going to promote them, and I use air quotes because I can't actually promote anyone, which makes me kind of sad. But they have the ability. I trust them. You did a great job. You know what you're doing. You can go out and do this for your own team now. If you want to start leading process improvement workshops for your team or other teams, you have the tools, you have the skills. I believe in you. You're able to do that now. I'm still always here to support them. Amy's here to support them. Emily's here to support them. But we want to give them those skills so that they can start taking that process improvement back to their teams and doing it on their own. When we conduct the workshop, it's just more of a graphic version of what we do. We prepare our event, and then we actually have the event. And these are the things that we're doing within the workshop. We're going to identify value add and non-value add activities. We have an activity that works really well for us called What's Going Well and What's Not Going Well. I've gotten so much good information from people just giving them a pad of sticky notes and saying, what's going well for you? Okay, now tell me what's not going well. I get great information. People feel safe. It's a great way to start out a workshop, making people feel like, okay, I can say what I need to say. Then we'll move into 8 wastes. We'll look at the process, identify things that maybe don't need to be happening. And we're going to identify themes, because if it's happening here, there's a possibility it's happening in another part of the organization. From there, we'll move into identifying potential root causes. We'll do our 5 whys activity or fishbone diagram, depending on what we've got going on. Again, we'll identify themes, because if it's happening here, it's probably happening in another place. We'd like to solve things holistically instead of just solving in a silo. We'll identify and select solutions. We're going to generate solutions and prioritize them. What do we need to tackle first? Again, identify themes. If we find a solution here that's going to work really well, maybe we can implement it somewhere else too. We'll create an action plan and assign tasks to make sure that these initiatives are being taken care of as we move forward from the workshop. We're going to report out on improvement event outcomes. So we're going to let people know, here's what we talked about, here's what we discovered, here's our action plan, here's how we're going to move forward with this. We have this roadmap and action plan template that says who has been assigned an action item, what is the action item, when is it going to be complete, when do we think it can be complete, and then we're going to follow through on these things. So we're going to monitor those action items in team meetings, value stream meetings, whatever avenue we think works best. We may need to go back to design, develop, and deploy. That cycle, we may have to go back to our process and implement changes. We may have to update our SIPOC. We may have to update our process map. We're going to have to redeploy it to the organization if we do that. We may find, after doing all of this process improvement work, that we do need technology, or we do need a large initiative to fix something. So we're going to submit a demand. But luckily, we've done all the hard work first, and that demand will be teed up and ready to go when it goes to one of our project teams. I'm worn out. That was a lot of information. If I caused anyone's brain to explode, I apologize. but it's question time. What questions do you have for us process nerds? Oh, yay! All right, you're exploding in a good way. That makes me very happy. I get really excited about this stuff, guys. I am a process nerd through and through.
Do your process models feed into any enterprise workflow or other systems?
Ooh, that's a great question. Emily, you're at a higher view than I am. What do you?
I'm curious to hear a little bit more about your question. Can you tell me a little more? I think that was Ryan, right?
Ryan. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, just coming off mute here.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if, like, are there any processes that are run off of your, or run off of the models? For example, enterprise workflow or other tools might take a model and actually execute some steps of it. So I'm just wondering if there's any connection to any of your systems there. So you've designed something, and then systems are running off of the business rules in this and these models, or is it purely for the work that you've talked about today?
Like, does it integrate with, like, we've got some of our models, like, with elevations, like on a larger scale, would be sort of like our operational rhythm. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Maybe more on the tech side. So
okay.
And it sounds like maybe this doesn't happen, but I know with some software you can take a modeled process. If you've identified the systems and you've identified the different swim lanes, and then it's going to actually go execute that process until
Gotcha.
someone needs to take action or whatever. So, but it sounds like maybe you guys don't do that today.
I think Genevieve has a good answer for you, actually. Genevieve, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I can take this one. Can everyone hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, good. So I'm Genevieve. I lead our group within BPM. And we've only done this in little areas. And the example I'm going to give is around consumer lending. So we have a very specific workflow around the loan coming through the pipe. And we use those statuses to then trigger in the system. So everything is built in consumer lending. So to sort of answer your question from workflow, we have it built into like our loan origination system and intake, where we're using that map to then automate. If a status changes to this for decisioning, it pushes to here. And then the calculations done behind the scenes. But this is something that we're just kind of getting into. It's been a lot more documentation. And we do have something coming on the horizon around more rigorous automated loan decisioning. And we expect to be using more of that workflow integration there.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ryan, that was a great question. We had to bring in the big guns for that one.
I'm barely a big gun. They make me look good.
Kirk, I know you've had your hand up too.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a couple questions. So I'll ask one, and then I'll let you go ask somebody else, and then maybe you can come back to me. The first question I had was around your ability to investigate how processes are actually being executed. So do you have any sort of mechanisms like in BlueWorks Live or anything like that, where you can actually see how often things go through the happy path versus, skip over 7 steps and go to other aspects? The name of that particular type of investigation is completely escaping me, but yeah, I guess that's my first question.
For me personally, and I'll let some of the folks on the value stream who are more technology answer their own. For me, the best way that I do it, I go out and talk to the people who do the processes day after day. That has been old reliable for me. I get the best information when I actually go out and talk to the people who do the thing every day, day in, day out. I can look at the process and get a good idea of, okay, this is what I think my understanding of it should be. And then I will go out and do some job shadowing and I will see what they actually do. I'm like, oh, wow, that's completely different.
Yeah, Kari, I'll just add to that. I do support one of the value streams, and So within BlueWorks itself, no, we don't have a metric in there or something saying, hey, you skip from step 1 to 7 and we've done that X number of times, right? But we do have, I don't know if you talked about the compass in here a little bit. I know you're talking about Tom and all of his data, but we do have a lot of data which correlates with these processes. So we can see if the data is trending in the wrong direction, then we can kind of tie it back to the process and look at, are we still following this, or is this failing? Has it changed? And dig in that way.
So the term I was looking for, my colleague reminded me, is process mining. So thank you.
Oh, go ahead. I'll go ahead and ask one quick question and then another question, and then we can go back to Kirk if he has another question. So the first one was, where will the recordings from today be located?
Those will be sent out to all participants after the meeting.
Great. And then Lynn asks, your measures are about how well or not well you are doing. How do you address why you are doing that well? Are those the lead measures, or do you look beyond those?
Yes, those were the lead measures primarily. Is what are we doing to adjust this? So when I was talking about my losing the 5 pounds, I can go to the gym, 4 days a week. I can eat less than 2,500 calories a day, and I can drink less than 5 drinks a week. Those are the things that I'm going to be measuring that will tell me if my lag measurement is going to come out the way that I wanted it to. Does that help?
We're getting a little bit more, we're trying to get a little bit more mature as an organization and linking some of those lead and lag measures. I think in some areas of the organization, we do a really good job of that. And in other parts of the organization, they're still just sort of starting to learn those concepts a little bit more. So linking those consistently is really part of our growth right now. Kirk, is your hand up again, or is that from before? Okay.
Yeah, I said I was going to have lots of questions. For the enterprise process model, you mentioned that you're revisiting it. Is your intention to make minor changes? Are you sticking with APQC, or are you going to kind of go back to the drawing board? What does that look like for you? I know that's kind of future looking, but I'm just curious.
Great question. So I can answer this one if that's okay. So one of the things that our existing enterprise process map, I think, can do better is really visualize our value stream funnel. And so we added the value streams to that enterprise process map several years after developing that process map, but it kind of, the way it's visualized is sort of like an afterthought. So we really want to make sure that that's visualized in a way that helps our staff understand the value stream model. The other piece of that is when we really clearly look at that whole value stream, part of that center, those key processes in the center, we're finding that we were really missing a couple of steps in there. One of the things that we're using to determine that we need some changes in that enterprise map is by looking at, within that enterprise process map, how many process maps and knowledge assets are published within each of those categories. And we're seeing a lot of inconsistency. So for instance, there's certain categories that there's a lot of categories that have about 30 process maps. There's a couple categories that have 1 or 2 process maps. There's one category that has over 300 process maps. And so I think that inconsistency really points to the fact that maybe we need to think about how we visualize that. So we're still basing it on that APQC model, but sort of trying to also incorporate that value stream piece a little bit more strongly. But we will continue to have leadership processes at the top, value stream processes in the middle, and then those supporting processes down below. Does that answer your question? Okay. we want to take the time to like validate. It's going to take a while to really do some deep validation of like, yes, these are all the really important processes, because that was developed in 2014, right? That's such a long time ago. And so we just want to make sure that we're not missing anything. So, but it'll still follow the same type of format.
Devin asks, what was some of the feedback you guys got from your 2019 Baldrig's examination team that you've incorporated into your business model or processes?
I wonder if Genevieve, if you've got any good feedback on that since you were involved at that point in some of the Baldrich activities.
I think there's kind of been a lot of history around this topic. In the early days, in our early days, like 2009 when we first started, we didn't have an incredibly robust strategic planning process. And so for those of you who attended, Category 2 or in Jerry's session this morning, it's very mature, it's very complex, but that was one of our initial pieces of you really need to get that sorted out, like really get it matured. So that was one of the early examples of incorporating the feedback report. I know some of the other areas that we've worked on are, especially more at the regional level, was around knowledge management. So those of you who participated in our Category 4, that work on reference desk and ultimately the summit, were examples of how we improve processes based on that feedback. And most recently, and something that we're kind of trying to actively address, is around vendor management. And I think for those of you who have been on the journey know it's just challenging to kind of figure out how to integrate those key suppliers into your strategic planning and that delivery. And it's been somewhat of a, we've been very fortunate. We have really strong partners, but as we get larger and we depend more upon external support, it becomes more critical for us to really understand that we're managing them effectively and also monitoring them. So this is an area from the feedback report that we know that we need to hone in on in the coming year, especially.
Awesome. Thank you to those of you from the team who jumped in to answer questions. And thank you everybody for submitting your questions. We love sharing information. Again, it was mentioned a couple times, credit unions are very collaborative, and we love the opportunity to hear from you. You guys post great questions that I think we jotted down. We're like, oh, we should think about this, or maybe we should consider doing this. So it was great hearing from you guys as well. I had mentioned a couple times, if you have questions, you want to reach out to us. Amy and I teach this class every month. We do BPM Basics and BPM Advanced every month. We love talking about this. We really nerd out on it. Connect with us, reach out to us. We would be more than happy to talk to you about it, answer any questions. We've had folks join us for our more in-depth sessions on BPM Basics and BPM Advanced before. Send me an email. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. I'm more than happy to invite you to that. We could, geek out on BlueWorks Live. We could show you how we use that. Again, collaborative. We're here to help. So if you have questions, please let us know.